Rodriguez's hands shook as he read the details. The Zephyrians, those gentle beings who had saved humanity's first lost colony, were facing extinction. A brutal empire called the Vorthak had discovered their hidden world and was systematically destroying their crystal cities. The Zephyrians had finally, after 3 centuries of silence, activated the ancient beacon they had been given by Captain Chen, sending out a call for help across the galaxy. The Admiral's first call was to President Lisa Wang, who listened to the report in stunned silence before giving the order that would change galactic history forever. "Honor the promise," she said simply. "Wake up the fleet." The awakening. In the dark spaces between stars, in hidden bases built inside hollow asteroids, in camouflaged stations orbiting forgotten moons, humanity's true military might begin to stir. Ships that had slept for decades powered up their engines. Soldiers who had trained for a war they thought might never come received their activation orders. The largest military force in galactic history began to move. The flagship of this hidden armada was the ESV Debt of Honor, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything in the official human fleet. Its captain, Elena Vasquez, had been chosen for this role 20 years earlier and had waited patiently for this day. As her ship emerged from its hiding place in the Kuiper Belt, she opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "This is Captain Vasquez to all ships of the Remembrance Fleet," she announced. "Today we honor the debt our species owes to those who showed us mercy when we needed it most. Today we prove that humanity never forgets a favor. All ships, set course for the Zephyrian home system. Maximum speed." The journey. As the massive fleet jumped into hyperspace, word of their mission spread through the human government and military. What had begun as a carefully guarded secret was now becoming reality, and the implications were staggering. Humanity was about to reveal that they possessed military technology and forces far beyond what anyone in the galaxy suspected. The journey to the Zephyrian system would take 3 days at maximum hyperspace speed. During that time, the fleet's commanders reviewed intelligence reports about their enemy. The Vorthak Empire was a collection of aggressive species that had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and ruthless tactics. They were known for completely destroying any civilization they defeated, leaving no survivors and no trace that those worlds had ever been inhabited. But the Vorthak had made one crucial mistake. They had attacked the wrong species. They had hurt the beings who had once saved humanity's children, and now they were about to learn why the galaxy's younger species whispered stories about human vengeance around their campfires. The arrival, when the Remembrance Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system. The scene that greeted them was one of devastation. The beautiful crystal cities that had once dotted the planet's surface were burning. Vorthak warships filled the orbital space around the world, systematically bombarding any signs of life below. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Debt of Honor and felt her heart break as she watched the destruction of the world that had saved humanity. But her grief quickly turned to cold fury as she opened a communication channel to the entire Vorthak fleet. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Space Navy," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of waiting. "You are attacking a species under the protection of humanity. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Vorthak commander's response was predictable. Laughter, followed by a demand for humanity's surrender. The alien's words were still echoing through space when Captain Vasquez gave the order that the galaxy would remember forever. "All ships," she said quietly, "show them why humanity never forgets a debt." The reckoning. The revelation. The Vorthak fleet commander, War Master Krog, had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed countless civilizations. He had seen every type of military force the galaxy could produce, from the disciplined formations of the Altarian Republic to the swarming fighters of the insectoid hives. But nothing had prepared him for what emerged from human space that day. The human fleet that appeared before his sensors was impossible. The ships were massive beyond anything in galactic records, their hulls gleaming with an almost liquid metal that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. The largest vessel, which identified itself as the Debt of Honor, was 3 times the size of his own flagship and bristled with weapon systems that his computers couldn't identify. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The gravitational field collapsed inward, creating a miniature black hole that lasted for exactly 3.7 seconds before dissipating. In that brief moment, over 300 Vortex ships were compressed into a sphere of matter no larger than a marble, which then vanished as the artificial singularity consumed itself. The silence that followed was absolute. Every Vortex ship in the system immediately surrendered. The aftermath. In the days that followed, news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy faster than any government could control it. Humanity, the species that most civilizations had dismissed as young and peaceful, had revealed military capabilities that exceeded those of every other known power combined. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, with representatives from hundreds of species demanding explanations. How long had humanity possessed such weapons? What other secrets were they hiding? Most importantly, what did this mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Ambassador Sarah Martinez, humanity's representative to the Council, stood before the assembled delegates and delivered a speech that would be remembered for millennia. "We have never sought to deceive you," she said, "but we have also never forgotten that the galaxy can be a dangerous place for those who cannot defend themselves. What you witnessed at the Zephyrian homeworld was not conquest or aggression. It was gratitude. It was the fulfillment of a promise made 3 centuries ago by a desperate captain to beings who showed mercy when they had no obligation to do so." The new reality. The rescue of the Zephyrians marked the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. Species that had once ignored humanity now sought alliance with them. Trade agreements were renegotiated, borders were redrawn, and the entire structure of galactic civilization shifted to accommodate the reality of human power. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed the concept of debt and obligation. The story of humanity's ancient promise and its fulfillment became a legend told across 1,000 worlds. Children of dozens of species learned about the humans who waited 300 years to repay a kindness, who built a secret fleet not for conquest, but for gratitude. The Zephyrian Renaissance. With the Vortex threat eliminated, the Zephyrians began to rebuild their shattered world. But they were no longer alone in their efforts. Human engineers and scientists worked alongside the crystal beings to restore their cities, their art, and their culture. The partnership that had begun with a rescue in deep space evolved into something deeper, a friendship between species that transcended the usual boundaries of galactic politics. Luminous Harmony, now ancient by Zephyrian standards, stood in the rebuilt grand spire of their capital city and spoke to a gathering of both species. 3 centuries ago, we offered aid to strangers because it was right to do so, the being said, its crystalline voice ringing with emotion. Today we have learned that kindness, like energy, is neither created nor destroyed. It merely changes form, and sometimes it returns to us magnified beyond all expectation. The promise kept. Captain Elena Vasquez remained in orbit around the Zephyrian homeworld for several months, overseeing the reconstruction efforts and ensuring that no other hostile forces would threaten the peaceful species. On the day she finally prepared to return to human space, she received a personal message from the Zephyrian Council of Harmonies. "We know that your people could have used their great fleet for conquest." The message read, "You could have built an empire that spanned the galaxy. Instead, you chose to honor an ancient debt to beings who no longer had the power to enforce it. This choice reveals the true nature of humanity's strength. It is not in your weapons or your ships, but in your memory of kindness received and your determination to pass that kindness forward." As the Remembrance Fleet prepared to return to its hidden bases, Captain Vasquez looked out at the restored crystal cities sparkling on the planet below. The debt had been paid, but something more valuable had been created in its place. Humanity had proven to the galaxy that some things were worth more than power or territory. Sometimes, The greatest strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to remember and protect. The galaxy had regretted testing humanity's resolve, but from that regret would come a new understanding. The humans were not just another species to be calculated and manipulated. They were something rarer and more dangerous, a people who never forgot a favor and who would cross the void itself to honor their word. The ancient debt. The lost colony. 300 years ago, when humanity was still young among the stars and our ships were slow and fragile, a terrible disaster struck one of our earliest colony expeditions. The massive transport vessel, New Dawn, carried 50,000 sleeping colonists toward a distant world called Haven's Rest. But fate had other plans. A massive solar storm, unlike anything in recorded history, tore through the ship's navigation systems and hurled it far off course into the empty void between star systems. Captain Sarah Chen woke to alarms screaming through the corridors and the ship's eye reporting catastrophic damage. The navigation computer was fried, the communication arrays were destroyed, and worst of all, they were completely lost in a region of space that appeared on no human map. The fuel reserves that should have lasted another 6 months were leaking into space through hull breaches, and the life support systems were failing one by one. For weeks, the crew worked desperately to repair what they could while rationing food and oxygen. The sleeping colonists remained in their pods, unaware that they were slowly dying in the cold darkness between the stars. Captain Chen sent out distress signals in every direction, but they were too far from any human settlement to be heard. She knew that unless a miracle happened, the New Dawn would become humanity's first ghost ship, carrying 50,000 souls into eternal darkness. The Crystal Guardians. When the miracle came, it arrived in a form that no human had ever imagined. A ship appeared on their sensors, but it was unlike anything in human records. It moved like liquid light, changing shape as it traveled, and it seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft, blue energy. The beings who emerged from this impossible vessel were even more extraordinary. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall, with bodies that seemed to be carved from pure crystal, but crystal that moved and flowed like water. Their faces held an ancient wisdom, and their voices rang like music when they spoke. They had been exploring the outer reaches of the galaxy when they detected the New Dawn's failing systems, and despite having no knowledge of humans or any obligation to help, they chose to act. Dr. Maria Santos, the ship's chief scientist, later wrote in her journal that she would never forget the moment when the first Zephyrian stepped aboard their dying vessel. The being's name was Luminous Harmony, and when it saw the desperate condition of the humans, its crystal form seemed to glow brighter with what could only be described as compassion. The Zephyrians worked for days to save the New Dawn. They shared their advanced technology freely, repairing systems that human engineers thought were beyond hope. They provided energy cells that would power the ship for years, medical supplies that could heal injuries no human doctor could treat, and most importantly, they gave the humans detailed star charts that would guide them safely home. The promise made. As the New Dawn prepared to continue its journey, now with a safe path back to human space, Captain Chen stood before Luminous Harmony in the ship's main cargo bay. Around them, thousands of grateful colonists had gathered to witness this historic moment. The captain's voice was thick with emotion as she spoke words that would echo through history. "We are a young species, and we know little of the galaxy's ways," she said. "But we know honor, and we know gratitude. What you have done for us today will never be forgotten. If your people ever face danger, if you ever need help, humanity will answer that call. This I swear by Earth's blue sky and by the stars that guide us home." Luminous Harmony's crystal form shimmered, and its musical voice filled the cargo bay. "We seek no payment for kindness, young ones, but we accept your words and hold them precious. May the stars light your path safely home." The Zephyrians escorted the New Dawn to the edge of human space before disappearing back into the cosmic depths. The rescued colonists eventually established a thriving world, and their story became legend throughout human civilization. But Captain Chen's promise was not forgotten. It was written into the very foundation of humanity's expanding government, encoded into military protocols, and passed down through generations of leaders. The protocol. In the decades that followed, humanity grew stronger and more advanced. We built great fleets, established colonies across hundreds of worlds, and took our place among the galactic community. But we never forgot the debt we owed to the Zephyrians. A secret protocol was established, known only to the highest levels of human government and military command. It was called Protocol Remembrance, and it stated simply, should the Zephyrians ever call for aid, humanity will respond with all available force, regardless of cost or consequence. But it wasn't just the size of the ships that stunned the Vorthek commander. It was their number. His tactical display showed over 2,000 human vessels arranged in perfect formation, their presence filling the space around the Zephyrian homeworld like a steel wall between his fleet and the planet below. Where had humanity been hiding such a force? How had they kept this secret from the galactic intelligence networks? Impossible, Krog muttered as he stared at the display. The humans are a young species. Peaceful. They have no military tradition, no warrior culture. This must be some kind of deception. The response. Captain Vasquez waited exactly 60 seconds for the Vorthek response to her ultimatum. When none came except for confused chatter between enemy ships, she opened a channel to her fleet commanders. The time for warnings had passed. All ships, this is your captain speaking, she announced. 300 years ago, the Zephyrians saved 50,000 human lives when they had no obligation to do so. They asked for nothing in return except that we remember their kindness. Today, we show the galaxy what human memory looks like. The first salvo from the human fleet was not the chaotic barrage that most species would unleash. Instead, it was a precisely coordinated strike that demonstrated technological superiority beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the human ships, each one targeted with surgical precision. The weapons didn't just destroy their targets, they disintegrated them completely, turning massive Vorthek warships into clouds of their component atoms. In the first 30 seconds of combat, the human fleet destroyed over 100 enemy vessels without taking a single hit in return. The Vorthek shields, which had been considered impenetrable by galactic standards, proved useless against human weapons. The enemy's return fire struck the human ships and simply disappeared into their defensive fields like raindrops hitting an ocean. The technology. Admiral Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from Terra Command, his eyes wide with amazement, even though he had helped plan this moment for decades. The weapons and defenses being deployed by the Remembrance Fleet represented centuries of secret research and development. While humanity had presented a peaceful face to the galaxy, their best scientists had been working in hidden laboratories to push the boundaries of physics itself. The energy weapons that were tearing through the Vorthek fleet were based on principles that other species had declared impossible. Human scientists had learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, creating beams that could selectively disassemble the molecular bonds of any target. The defensive shields surrounding the human ships didn't just block incoming fire. They converted the energy of enemy weapons into power for their own systems. But perhaps most impressive was the fleet's coordination. Each ship was linked to its neighbors through quantum communication networks that allowed for instant information sharing across the entire formation. The human fleet wasn't just 2,000 individual ships. It was a single massive organism with thousands of eyes, thousands of hands, and one unified mind. The root. War Master Krog realized within minutes that his fleet was facing annihilation. The humans weren't just defeating his forces, they were dismantling them with an efficiency that suggested this was barely an effort for them. He ordered a full retreat, hoping to preserve what remained of his armada, but even that simple maneuver proved impossible. The human ships moved with a speed and agility that defied their size. Vessels that should have been slow and cumbersome due to their massive bulk instead danced through space like fighters, cutting off every escape route from the system. The Vorthek found themselves trapped in a box of human steel, with no way out except through the weapons that were systematically reducing their fleet to cosmic dust. "Surrender," Captain Vasquez broadcast on all frequencies. "Surrender now, and your crews will be spared. Continue to fight, and we will demonstrate why humanity's enemies learn to fear the dark between stars." Some Vorthok captains tried to surrender, powering down their weapons and broadcasting their submission. But War Master Krog, his pride wounded beyond reason, ordered his remaining ships to fight to the death. It was a decision that would haunt galactic history for generations to come. The demonstration. What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Zephyrian demonstration, though most species preferred not to speak of it directly. Captain Vasquez, seeing that the Vorthok commander would not accept surrender, decided to send a message that would echo across every star system in known space.